Forgiveness, I think, is one of the most powerful and one of the most misunderstood practices in human life. At its best, forgiveness is an act of profound courage, right? The decision to release resentment and to stop carrying the weight of bitterness and, and to open the door for reconciliation and freedom. But at its worst, though, forgiveness becomes this disguise. It becomes a way, in essence, to avoid the pain of what actually happened, or a way to pretend that the healing has already occurred when the wound is still raw. And that's the danger of what we call spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing is when we use this lofty language or quick declarations of faith to skip the hard work of grieving, of lamenting, and processing what was actually lost. It's when someone says, oh, I forgave them and it's all in the past now, right? While the hurt is still festering beneath the surface. See, on the outside, it looks noble, but on the inside, this is avoidance. And avoidance never heals. Avoidance just buries. But what is buried alive doesn't really die though, does it? It just waits. It waits on the corner of our memory. And it waits in the ways that we tighten when certain names are mentioned, or in the ways that we pull back from trust without actually knowing why. When forgiveness becomes bypassing, the hurt doesn't disappear. It just hides, and hidden hurt always leaks out eventually, doesn't it? Forgiveness now is not forgetting. It's not excusing. It's not a fast forward button that allows us to skip the pain. Forgiveness, or real forgiveness, it begins with honesty. It begins with naming the wrong for what it was. It begins with allowing ourselves to feel the grief of what was lost. And only then, like once the wound has been seen and acknowledged, can we release the debt and then move forward in freedom. Now the problem is, we don't like pain, do we? We don't like grief. We don't like sitting in the rawness of betrayal or disappointment or injustice. And so we rush. We use spiritual phrases as shortcuts. I just gave it over to God, we say, right? Or I'm over it now, right? It's all good. But if those words are spoken before the hurt has actually been faced, they're not forgiveness, they're denial. Integrity demands something far different. Integrity insists that we align our words with reality. So if we say that we've forgiven while we're still carrying resentment, we're lying to ourselves. If we declare healing when the wound is still bleeding, we're bypassing. And bypassing does not lead to freedom. It leads to fractures of our soul that over time will widen. Now, I've done this myself. I've told myself that I was being strong, I was being spiritual, I was being forgiving, when in reality I was just avoiding the pain. I wanted the appearance of maturity without the process of healing. And in those moments, what I was calling forgiveness was really fear, right? Fear of facing my own pain, fear of confronting the loss, fear of actually admitting how much it hurts. But feeling like the healing requires truth, and intimacy requires healing. And if we skip the hurt, we also are skipping the depth of that connection that can only come on the other side of honesty. Now, forgiveness that bypasses pain is not forgiveness at all. It's a pretense, and pretense is really the enemy of intimacy. Young men, especially, I want you to hear this. Just heads up. We've been taught that strength means suppressing emotion, and that maturity means getting over it, right? That real men don't dwell on their wounds. And so we take those messages and we baptize them in these spiritual phrases, convincing ourselves that quick forgiveness is a sign of character. But quick forgiveness that actually skips grief is not character. I would say that's cowardice. It really robs us of the integrity that we're made to live within. Forgiveness is a journey, and it's not a shortcut. It's a process that honors the hurt before it releases it. And it requires the courage to face what was broken rather than pretending that it was never there. That's, I think, where healing begins. Not in skipping the hurts, but in walking through it. And one of the reasons that spiritual bypassing feels so tempting is because it looks good on the outside. See, in many faith communities, forgiveness is celebrated as the ultimate sign of maturity, right? If someone wrongs you and you quickly say, "Oh, I forgave them," you'll often be praised, right? People will call you strong, and they'll call you spiritual and even Christ-like. And who doesn't want to be seen that way, right? But here's the problem though. If the forgiveness is rushed, it bypasses grief. And then it's not really maturity at all. It's performance. It's a way to earn approval without doing the real work. And that's not integrity. Integrity does not fake healing to look good. Integrity walks through the fire of pain and then emerges on the other side with scars that are real. Scars that actually testify to the healing and not to avoidance. See, bypassing forgiveness is it's like painting over mold that's on a wall. It looks clean for a while, but the rot underneath keeps growing, and eventually the wall will collapse. The same thing will happen to our souls. If we cover our wounds with spiritual language instead of actually tending to them with honesty, the wound doesn't heal. It festers. And then one day, the cracks begin to show. True forgiveness requires us to stop pretending. It requires us to slow down and ask, what actually happened? How did this affect me? And what was broken? See, until those questions are answered, forgiveness is premature. Without honesty, forgiveness is not a release. It's a repression. And the irony is, bypassing doesn't even give us what we think it does. I mean, we hope it will give us freedom from the pain, but it just chains us to it in hidden ways. And so we think that it will make us stronger, but it only makes us more fragile because the wound has never really truly been addressed, right? And if we believe that it will bring us intimacy with others or God, or that's not true, because it really creates more distance, right? It cannot grow where truth is denied. So, what does real forgiveness actually look like? It looks like sitting in attention. It looks like grieving before you release it. It looks like naming what was wrong without minimizing it. It looks like telling the truth even when that is costly. And then, and only then, it looks like releasing the other person from the debt that they owe you. And that release can be powerful, but it has to come after honesty, not instead of it. I know how easy it is to confuse forgiveness with bypassing, especially for young men, because many of us were raised to just handle it, right? Do this quickly and to move on, to not dwell on the hurt. And then when we add spiritual language to that cultural script, it creates this cocktail of avoidance. And so we think that we're doing the right thing, but really we're just numbing ourselves in the name of maturity. And here's what gets lost when we do that. Intimacy gets lost. See, if I pretend to forgive you when I haven't really admitted my pain, then you don't know me. You only know the version of me that wants to appear strong. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't know you as well either, because I'm not relating to you through authenticity. It's just through a mask, right? That kind of relationship might look peaceful on the outside, but on the inside, it's really built on sand, isn't it? Integrity will call us to something far better, though. It calls us to do the hard work of feeling, of naming, of grieving, and then forgiving. It calls us to align our words with reality, not with performance. It calls us to value intimacy over image, even when that means admitting that we're still in pain. That's what real strength looks like. Not skipping the hurt, but facing it with courage. Another danger of spiritual bypassing is that it distorts our understanding of love. When forgiveness is rushed, it can actually become this tool for enabling harm. See, if I claim to forgive without first naming the wrong, I'm unintentionally communicating that what happened wasn't really that serious, and that my boundaries aren't very important or matter. That the damage that was done to me is something to overlook rather than to actually address. And this creates a cycle where people learn that they can hurt us without any consequence. I mean, they see that our forgiveness is automatic, and instead of actually being transformed by it, they're really, in essence, shielded from the responsibility. And that isn't love, that is complicity. Real love insists on truth. It names the harm clearly, not to punish it, but to make space for genuine restoration. See, without truth, forgiveness is not healing. It's more so erasure. And this is why forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. Forgiveness is something I can choose in my heart, whereas reconciliation requires honesty and accountability and change ultimately. See, if I bypass my own hurt in order to quickly forgive, I might tell myself that the relationship is restored, but in reality, nothing has been repaired. And what was broken has simply been covered over. And intimacy that's built over cover-ups doesn't last. Young men in particular, I think, are vulnerable to this confusion. We often think that forgiveness is a performance of strength, right? I'm not bothered. We'll say, I've moved on. It's over. I'm over it. But that's not forgiveness. That's numbing. And numbness may look tough, but it's quite fragile actually. Because when the next hurt comes, all the old unprocessed wounds will resurface with it. And the pain multiplies, and suddenly we're carrying years of buried hurt that we never took the time to deal with. See, integrity demands a different path. Integrity says, I will not pretend that I'm healed when I'm not. I will not call something forgiven until I've actually faced what it cost me. I'm not going to declare reconciliation until truth has been told and accountability has been embraced. And that's harder, that's slower and more uncomfortable. But it's the only path that leads to freedom. There's a beautiful paradox in this. You see, when we refuse to bypass the hurt, forgiveness actually becomes deeper. It becomes rooted. It becomes real. Instead of being a fragile surface gesture, it becomes this strong foundation for intimacy. Because when I've faced my wound and still chosen to release the debt, that forgiveness is unshakable. It's not denial anymore, it's strength. It's not avoidance, it's actually freedom. See, I've seen this in my own journey. Like the times when I rushed through forgiveness, I ended up more bitter in the long run. But the times when I allowed myself to grieve and to be honest, to sit in the pain before actually releasing it, those were the times when forgiveness felt alive. It felt costly, but also liberating. And it's then that I was allowed to reconnect with integrity rather than pretending my way towards it. And this is why I would say intimacy and forgiveness are inseparable. Intimacy is about being fully known. And if I hide my hurts, if I cover it up quickly with quick forgiveness, then I'm not truly known, am I? You only know the polished version of me in that setting, not the wounded one. But when I bring my wounds to the table, not to weaponize them, but to acknowledge them, then forgiveness can actually build intimacy. Because it's real, it's rooted in truth. And truth is always this foundation of love, isn't it? So, here's the crossroads. Will forgiveness in our lives, will it be real or will it be a bypass? Will it be the pathway to a deeper freedom or a performance that avoids the hurt? See, that choice makes all the difference. Real forgiveness is not fast, it's not clean, and it doesn't wrap things up with a neat little bow. Real forgiveness is messy. It's slow. It takes us through the valley of grief before it lifts us to the mountaintop of release. But that's why it transforms us, because it forces us to be honest. It forces us to confront the wound instead of skipping over it. And in that honesty is where we find integrity. Spiritual bypassing, it offers a counterfeit shortcut, right? It promises peace without the process, or healing without pain, or release without responsibility. But those promises are empty, because what is avoided isn't erased. It just waits. It waits until the cracks show, until the bitterness starts leaking out, and until the intimacy that we crave is destroyed by the very denial that we thought would save it. The truth, my dear listener, is forgiveness is one of the most radical acts of strength that we can practice. But it's only so when it's real. Only when it faces the hurt and then still chooses to release it. Only when it's grounded in truth instead of pretense. That kind of forgiveness doesn't just restore us, it reshapes us. It creates intimacy, not just stability. It creates freedom, not just performance. It creates a life that's aligned with integrity, where our words match our reality and our hearts are no longer chained by what was done to us. At Uber Vintagers, this is really the heartbeat of my mission. Calling men into lives where forgiveness is not a mask, but it's a movement towards intimacy and integrity, where healing is not a bypass, but it's a process, and where courage replaces avoidance, and where honesty replaces pretense. Because intimacy cannot grow in denial. It can only grow in truth. And here's where I want to leave you, just with a glimpse of what's coming ahead. See, in the coming days here, I'm going to be shifting into a larger framework that I call it the 764 movements. It's a way of understanding growth that takes everything that we've been wrestling with in virtues versus vice in this month, and expands it into this roadmap for living with purpose. And what we're doing right now, refusing to bypass and choosing truth over shortcuts and aligning forgiveness with integrity, this is the kind of foundation that the 764 movement is really built on. And soon we're going to unpack that together. So stay tuned for that. But for now, don't settle for counterfeit. Don't settle for spiritual bypassing. Don't rush forgiveness just to appear strong. But choose, my dear listener, the harder and the truer path. Choose forgiveness that faces the hurt and honors the truth and opens the door to real intimacy. See, that's the kind of forgiveness that heals. That's the kind of forgiveness I think that lasts. Let me know in the comments how this episode landed for y'all. I'd love to hear some of your epiphanies, insights. I'll see you in the next episode.